Hello, science enthusiast. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you part 2 of our weekly science and technology current affairs, August 1st to 8th August 2025, covering 20 important updates. If you have not watched part 1 yet, I recommend checking it out first so you don't miss anything important. So these are current affairs science and technology updates are especially useful for UPSC, BPSC, state PCS, SSC, SBI, IBPS, ACIO, NDA, CDS, and different types of competitive exam. Kindly watch many more biology lesson for needs, aims, English grammar videos are already on my channel, and also many more biology lesson for NEET and aims and English grammar topics for competitive exams are coming up very soon. So stay tuned till the end. Stay tuned till the end and let's get started with the news. After watching this video, if you find this video is useful, kindly like, share and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future updates. Do check out my grammar series, biology videos, biotechnology series, current affairs series. Let's get started. Remaining 20 news of science and technology updates from 1st to 8th August 2025. Next news is Hong Kong enforces stable coin licensing. So it is news from Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority enforced the stable coins ordinance starting August 2025. So this new law aims to regulate stable coins, a type of which is a type of cryptocurrency linked to asset like fiat currencies. So it is this law aims to regulate stable coins, which is a type of cryptocurrency linked to asset like fiat currencies. So this movement follows rising global interest in stable coins for finance and trade. So it sets clear rules for user and protects investor from unregulated risk. So what are stable coins? The stable coins are cryptocurrency which is designed to maintain stable values. They differ from volatile coins like Bitcoin or Ether. It is totally different from volatile coins like Bitcoin or Ether. So this their value is pegged to assets such as the United States dollar, euro, gold, or other cryptocurrencies. So these values are like US dollar, euro, gold, or other cryptocurrencies. So these pegging helps keep their price steady, making them useful for everyday transaction and trading with the help of regulating stable coins. About details of Hong Kong stablecoin licensing. So the ordinance bans unlicensed stablecoin offering to retail investor. Companies must obtain. It is a law that company must obtain a license from Hong Kong Monetary Authority to issue stablecoins legally. So they need to meet requirements on reserve management, redemption, and asset accessibilities. On issuer must be follow anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing rules. So only a few licenses will be granted initially, indicating that there is a strict control of Hong Kong Monetary Authority. So, importance of regulating stable coins because stable coins are widely used for trading and cross border. It is also used for cross border payments. So, in countries with unstable currencies, they help people preserve their savings. Regulation ensures issuers hold adequate reserves and discloses assets. They will disclose their asset transparently, and it reduces risk of fraud also and financial instability also. So the global stablecoin market is worth around $250 billion. There are some risk and volatility in stable coins. Despite their name, stable coins can lose their peg and so price or oftenly so price fluctuations. Technical issues or market panic are also there, which is reducing their sudden drops cause of sudden drops. The collapse of Terra's UST and Luna in 2022 wiped billions from the crypto market. So many of them are lost from the crypto market. About global trends in stable coin regulation, Hong Kong joins countries like United States, Japan, and Singapore in regulating strict law for stable coins. The US Genius Act mandates full reserve backing and public disclosure. Japan and Singapore have also introduced rule to supervise stable coin issuers. So China's restrict crypto but sees potential in Hong Kong's regulatory framework for its firms. Impact on crypto ecosystem and finance. Regulation may limit the number of issuers. It will definitely reduce the number of issuer, but increase market stability and reduces risk of fraud and financial instability. It encourages responsible innovation in digital finance. Stable coins with clear rules can boost confidence among different types of different investors and businesses. So Hong Kong's approach could become a model for other financial countries and centers also. Next is about World Bank income classification system. World Bank income classification system. So it remains a key tool, important tool for comparing different countries by their income. Updated annually, it divided countries into four groups based on gross national income per capita, GNI. Gross national, it's divided countries into four groups based on gross national income per capita. So this system help researchers and policy makers understand global economic diversity clearly, transparently, and consistently. So in 2024, the World Bank continued to classify countries into low, lower, middle, upper, middle, higher income groups. So they have divided like low, then lower, middle, then upper, middle, and high income groups. So four groups based on GNI per capita. So these are based on fixed income threshold adjusted yearly for inflation. Over the past 2 decades, many countries have shifted upward in income groups. Many countries are shifted, improving upward in income groups, reflecting their economic growth. However, some countries have moved downward due to conflict or crisis. About gross national income per capita, it measures the average income of a country's resident, country's people, including income earned abroad. It is reported in local currency and converted to United States dollars using exchange rates. So it is converted to United States dollars using exchange rates. So this standardization allows for consistent comparison across countries. So the World Bank uses GNI per capita as the sole criteria for income classification. About income group thresholds, the income groups are defined by fixed threshold in United States dollars. As of 2024, these are low income dollar 1,135 or less, lower middle income dollar 1,136 to dollar 4,495. Upper middle income is dollar 496 to dollar 13,935. High income is more than dollar 13,935. So these are the threshold which are updated annually based on the global inflation rates, but it remain absolute, not related to other different countries' incomes. So about history and purpose of classification, the system began in the late 1980s to guide lending policies. Basically, it is divided, and this policies this started classification started in the late 1980s to guide lending policies. So the low income threshold marked eligibility for concessional loans. Additional threshold were introduced to better distinguish, to differentiate countries based on their economic income distribution. So today the classification is independent of lending rules. It is totally independent of lending rules. Today's classification, it serves mainly for statistical and policy analysis. Today's classification is totally based on statistical and policy analysis. Now about the country movements between groups, countries can move between income groups as their GNI per capita changes, growth, currency fluctuation, population updates influences all these shifts, influences their GNI per capita. Most nation have increased risen over time due to economic development. However, some like Syria and Yemen have fallen. However, some like Syria and Yemen have fallen due to war and economic crisis, moving from lower middle to low income. So, about population distribution across income groups, population shares in each income groups are uneven. So, in 2004, 37% lived in low income countries. Points should be noted. In 2004, 37% lived in low income countries. By 2024, this fell below, it fell below 10%. So, the share in upper middle income countries rose from under 10% to 30%. Upper middle countries share increase from 10% to 35%. This indicates global economic progress, but also marks differences in disparities in wealth distribution. Next, news about district flood severity index. Recent research by IIT Delhi and IIT Chandigarh has introduced a district flood severity index for India. So it is a major achievement, a major work done by IIT Delhi and IIT Gandhinagar to introduce district flood severity index. It aims to provide a comprehensive measure of flood severity based at the district level. So it combines flood duration, area affected, deaths, injuries, and population to better assess flood impacts. The District Flood Severity Index addresses gaps in existing flood data and supports improved flood management policies. So these are the aim of DFSI, to address gap in existing flood data and to support people get problem during the floods. Need for a district level flood index. Why there is a need for district level flood index? Because lots of flooding happening in India, which causes displacement, injuries to the people, and death of many people regularly. So however, no standard database index till now existed to measure flood severity at the district scale. So this is the aim of district flood severity index, for flood response, to take a key administrative unit for flood response, and hence a district level index helps target relief and prevention efforts more effectively. So it fills this important gap during flood in any part of country. So data sources and parameters uses data collected annually since 1967. Since 1967, collected data since 1967 by the Indian Meteorological Departments. It includes river rain floods, large inundation, but often misses smaller events. It is not including smaller events. DFSI incorporates five main factors. It incorporates five main factors: the factors of flood duration in days, percentage of district area flooded historically, total death happened, injuries, and district population. So this multidimensional approach captures both flood magnitude and human impact as well. About calculation, the DFSI weigh flooding severity by combining the extent of flooding with population exposure and how many casualties happen in that area. So this approach avoids misleading conclusion and calculation based solely on flood frequency. Patna ranks highest in DFSI. Points should be noted. Patna ranks highest in DFSI, reflecting severe impacts in the Indo-Gangetic plains. So Patna face more floods. Urban flooding and development issue. Urban flooding is influenced by both heavy rainfall and because of poor urban planning in cities. Cities like experience frequent floods partly due to unplanned development blocking natural drainage. So many cities are facing blocking natural drainage. While Trimantapuram has the highest number of flood events, its DFSI rank is very less because of fewer casualties and small affected population. Better urban water management can reduce such floods. So if there is a better urban water management, it can definitely reduce such floods, such blocking of natural drainage like that. What are the limitation and future improvements? Current DFSI excludes agricultural floods. They are not including agricultural floods impact due to there is no data due to lack of data. It totally depend on available in Indian Meteorological Department data and district population figures. So it is not including agricultural flood impact. Researchers acknowledge the index can improve with finer data on flooded land types and socioeconomic factors. So it is a first step to encourage more detailed flood data collection and targeted mitigation. Next news is about, which is a very important news, India's organ transplant at record high in 2024. It is a big benchmark for India. So India achieved a historic milestone by performing over 18,900 organ transplant in 2024. India achieved a historic milestone by performing approximately 18,900 organ transplant in 2024. So this is the highest number recorded in a single year where the organ transplantation happened over 18,900. So this figure marks rise from fewer than 5,000 transplant happened in 2013. India is now third India is now third globally in total organ transplants. So it is a big achievement for India in organ transplantation, because India is now third globally in organ transplants after the United States and China. So the country also leads the world in hand transplant. India also leading the world's in hand transplants, reflecting advanced surgical skills and committed medical professionals. About current organ transplant scenario, it have surge increased remarkably, enhanced remarkably in recent years. This rise reflects their India's improved healthcare infrastructure and growing public awareness. Despite this, a large gap remains between patients needing transplant and available donors. Organ failure cases are increasing, creating pressure on the healthcare system. So the one drawback is also there, that organ failure cases are increasing. So it's increasing pressure on healthcare system. Thousands still wait for life-saving transplant each year. Efforts to boost organ, there is a many efforts which is has to be taken to boost organ donation. The government launched an Aadhaar based online pledge system. Aadhaar based online pledge system in 2023. Over 3.30 lakh citizens have pledged to donate their organs. So it is a really remarkable achievement that over 3.30 lakh citizens have pledged to donate their organs. It shows rising awareness and social commitment. The National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization actively promotes organ donation through companies and events. So states and medical institutions are urged to appoint permanent transplant coordinators. So it's helped to streamline donor identification and consent processes. There are few challenges in organ donation. The main challenge is the shortage of donors relative to demand. This gap is not due to unwillingness but lack of awareness and myth around donation. Family often hesitant to give timely consent. Public education and open dialogue are essential to overcome these challenges. Organ donation is a noble act, so this awareness government has to create among people that organ donation is a noble act. With one donor able to save up to 8 lives by donating their multiple organs. Government support and financing aid is required. The Rashtriya Arogya Nidhi provides financial help up to rupees 15 lakh for poor patient needing kidney, liver, heart or lung transplants. Post-transplant medical expenses receive additional support of up to 10,000 per month. Kidney transplant are also covered under Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So this scheme reduce the financial burden on patient and really encourage more transplants. Promoting preventive health measures. So the government advocates yoga and Ayurveda to strengthen the organs and boost immunity. Boost human immunity. Simple lifestyle may be adapted to prevent different types of diseases which is leading to organ damage. So Prime Minister has asked citizens to reduce more oil consumption by 10%, to reduce their oil consumption in their diet by 10%, to encourage a healthier futures, healthier life. So such preventive steps are very important to reduce the organ failure burden. Next news about the repairability index. Repairability index. So India took a very major step to promote sustainable electronics. So repairability index is to promote sustainable electronics. So this index ranks mobile phones and such appliances based on how easy they are to repair the old mobiles, availability of spare parts, and software support. So this index ranks mobile phones, different appliances available to repair old phone, availability of spare parts, and software support. So the government also introduced new e-waste policy. Government has introduced new electronic waste policy that include minimum payments to encourage formal recycling of these mobile phones. So these efforts aim to make repair a consumer right and recognize repair as a valuable cultural and intellectual resource. So about repairability index and electronic waste policies, it definitely help consumer choose products that last longer and are easier to fix and are easier to sort out and are easier to repair. It ranks devices on repair friendliness, spare part access, and software updates, alongside new electronic waste rules in incentives, formal recycling by setting minimum payments. So this reduces informal dumping and promotes responsible disposal. So the policies are aligned with global trends like European Union rights. It is aligned with global trends like European Union right to repair rules and United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 12. Sustainable Development Goal 12 on responsible consumption. So importance of tactic knowledge in repair is also required. So this is practical skill based on thorough observation and hands-on experience rather than formal training. So repairers diagnose problem using sensory cues and adapt creativity to constraints. So this knowledge supports India's technology resilience by extending device lifespan beyond planned above obsolescence. So, however, this informal expertise is often overlooked in policy and digital frameworks. So importance of tactic knowledge in repair is very requires. This knowledge supports India's technological resilience by extending device life beyond planned obsolescence. Now, there are some challenges also facing informal repairs. They lack access to formal skilling programs, policy support. This scheme focus on formal industrial roles that do not capture the improvisational nature of repair work. So this threatens to erode a vast undocumented reservoir of knowledge which is important for sustainability and economic opportunity. So there is some policy gap and opportunities gap also. Current policies like electronic waste management rules 2022, which is mainly focused on recycling of electronic waste with limited emphasis on repair. Recycling, they are given more focus on recycling with limited focus on repair as a preventive strategy. The NEP 2020 National Education Policy 2020 promotes experiential learning but does not adequately support repair expertise transmission. So it is a lack of NEP 2020. So it does not adequately support repair expertise transmission. Campaigns such as Mission Life Advocate Repair Mission Life campaign advocates favors repair and reuse, but lack targeted support for repair workers. So there is a need to integrate repairability into design, procurement, and skill development policies. So there is a need of role of artificial intelligence and digital public infrastructures. So artificial intelligence can definitely help codify repair knowledge through decision trees and language models that translate tactic expertise into cerebral formats. Artificial intelligence recognize informal repairance in digital platforms like eSRAM, recognizing informal repairers and in digital platforms. The name of that digital platform is eSRAM. eSRAM can connect them to social protection and training. So there is a need of designing for unmaking and circular economy. So it's the concept of unmaking involves designing product for easy disassembly, repair and reuse. So this approach treats breakdown as feedback and learning opportunities rather than failures. It provides learning opportunities rather than failures. So supporting them as sustainability stewards can reshape environmental and digital innovation in India. Next is about Chenab Hydropower Project. Chenab Hydropower Project. India has taken a decisive step by reviving the Sawalkote Hydroelectric Power Project on the Chenab River. So this move comes month after India suspended the India's water treaty with Pakistan. India has suspended the India's water treaty with Pakistan. So this project, first planned 6 decades ago, had been stalled due to treaty restriction. Now India is asserting its water energy security priorities by fast tracking with hydropower initiative. So about India's water treaty, Indus Water Treaty was signed in 1960 was signed in Indus Water Treaty was signed in 1960 under World Bank mediation. So it divided the Indus Basin rivers between India and Pakistan. India received rights over the eastern rivers. India have right over the eastern rivers like Ravi, Bees, and Satluj. Pakistan was allocated the western rivers Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. India was allowed only limited non-consumptive use on the western rivers, mainly for hydropower project without large storage capacity. So, why is there is a need of suspension of the treaty? So, recently India suspended the treaty, citing Pakistan's support for cross-border terror because of cross-border terrorism. This suspension ended obligation like prior project notification and data sharing. So India also restricted water flows from its dams on the Chenab, notably Baglihar and Salal. So this caused downstream water storage in Pakistan, affecting crucial crops such as paddy and cotton and raising serious concern in Islamabad. So Sawalkote hydropower project details, it is located near Sidhu village in Ramban district, Jammu and Kashmir. So this project will harness the Chenab's high velocity flow in the western Himalayas. It aims to generate a 1,856 megawatt largest hydropower power project in Jammu and Kashmir, which is surpassing the 900 megawatt Baglihar project. So, what are the significance of it? The Chenab's river catchment area spans over 10,000. It spans over 10,000 square kilometers above the slow line, which is giving immense hydropower potential exceeding, and this hydropower potential is exceeding 1,50,000 megawatt regionally. So this project is valued at 22,704 crore and is being fast tracked project as a project of national importance. It becomes now project of national importance with reduced bureaucratic delays, and aims India's goal of energy self-reliance, self-dependence, and maximizing its share of western river waters. So, shift in India's water policy, India decision to revise Sawalkote after suspending the IWT marks a strategic shift for India This reflects a broader policy to prioritize national interest in water and energy security. So this move also signals India's intent to assert greater control over transboundary, India's greater concern over control over transboundary water resources amid in between geopolitical tension. Next news about Mahanadi water dispute. Recent development have brought hope to the decade-old Mahanadi river water sharing dispute between Odisha and Chhattisgarh. Both states have expressed willingness to resolve the issue through negotiation. So, the Mahanandi Water Dispute Tribunal has granted additional time for talks and scheduled the next hearing for September 2025. So, it is a decade-old Mahanadi River water sharing dispute between Odisha and Chhattisgarh. So this marks shift from prolonged legal battles to political. It becomes legal battles to political dialogue. The dispute centers on this dispute's main reason on water dispute centers on water sharing from Mahanandi River, which flows from Mahanandi rivers, which flows from Chhattisgarh to Odisha. So Mahanandi water dispute is because of this only. So Odisha alleges that Chhattisgarh construction of upstream dam and barrages restricts water flow. This affects agriculture and livelihoods in Odisha lower basin, especially outside the monsoon season. The conflict has persisted for nearly 10 years with limited progress. So Odisha approached the Supreme Court in 2016 seeking a tribunal under the Interstate River Water Dispute Act 1956. Interstate River Water Dispute Act 1956. The center formed the Mahanandi Water Dispute Tribunal in 2018. So the tribunal's work involved data submission, inspection, and hearings. So, however, progress has been slow, with only one witness examined by 2024 and many issues still now not resolved. So about Mahanandi River, Mahanandi is a prominent eastwater flowing river in peninsular India. So it is renowned for its heavy silt load, frequent historical floods, and its importance in agriculture. Maha means great, Nadi means rivers. So it's state covered by the river basin at Chhattisgarh, Odisha, marginal region. Total length is around 900 kilometer. Its origin is near Farsia village, drains into Bay of Bengal near Pradeep, Odisha through a network of distributaries. So left bank tributaries also Seonath, Hasdeo, Mande. Right bank tributaries are Ong, Tel and Jong. Next news about WHO classifies, it's a very important news. WHO classifies hepatitis D as cancerous virus. It is alarming that HP hepatitis D as cancerous virus, how much it is harmful. So WHO has recently reclassified hepatitis D as a carcinogenic virus causing cancer, carcinogenic virus. So this decision marks the urgent need to prevent this viral hepatitis because it is caused by virus. To prevent this viral hepatitis, which remains global health concern, global health challenge. Hepatitis V virus infection, especially when combined with hepatitis B virus, hepatitis D virus infection, D virus when combined with the hepatitis B virus greatly increases the risk of liver cancer and different types of severe liver diseases. So this reclassification is expected to boost worldwide efforts in surveillance, research, and prevention. So it generates awareness in surveillance, research, and prevention worldwide. So hepatitis refers to liver inflammation, which is caused by virus, toxin, or which it is an autoimmune diseases destroying its own cell. The main five types of hepatitis is A, B, C, D, E. Hepatitis A spreads via fecal oral route and causes acute infection. Vaccine are available for hepatitis A. Hepatitis B spreads through blood and bodily fluids and causes chronic infection. For hepatitis B also vaccine is present. Hepatitis C transmits mainly through blood exposure, and hepatitis C has no vaccine. D and E has no, D also has no vaccine. So D infects only those with hepatitis B and worsen outcomes. D infects only those, the patient who has hepatitis B already, and it becomes worse in the condition, health condition of that patients. Hepatitis E spreads through contaminated water and flood. Hepatitis E vaccines are limited. So hepatitis D and its cancerous natures. Hepatitis D is a defective virus that requires always required that the patient must be having the hepatitis B virus. Then it will replicate, then it will reproduce with the presence of hepatitis B virus. So it cannot infect individual alone. D virus cannot infect individual alone. It always requires hepatitis B virus. Co-infection and superinfection with HBV causes more severe liver damage. So studies show HDV increases liver cancer risk 2 to 6 times compared to HBV alone. So around 75% of HDV patients develop liver cirrhosis within 15 years. HDB intensify a carcinogenic effect on hepatitis B, which itself HDB means hepatitis D virus. Intensify the carcinogenic effect on hepatitis B, which itself can cause cancer by integrating into liver cell DNA. Methods of transpiration, modes of transmission. Hepatitis D spreads similarly to as hepatitis B and C. Transmission occurs through blood and bodily fluids. It includes unsafe injection because of unsafe injection, unsafe blood transfusion, mother to child transmission, unprotected sexual contact. So these are the modes of transmission. High risk group includes intravenous drug user and those with chronic hepatitis B. So there are some preventive measures such as safe blood practices and barrier contraception are essential to prevent the mode of transmission. Diagnosis and prevention is also required. Diagnosis of hepatitis B involves blood test in detecting HDB, RNA, or antibodies. Since HDB depends on HBB, hepatitis D depends on hepatitis B. So, universal hepatitis B vaccination indirectly prevents hepatitis D infection. Despite inclusion in National Immunization Program, hepatitis B vaccine coverage low in many states, in many regions, in many countries. So safe injection practices, screening of blood products, and safe sex education are important for prevention of this hepatitis D. Emerging antiviral treatments like Bulvichid offer help for managing chronic HDB infection. So, emerging antiviral treatment, name of antiviral treatments are Bulvichid, which is giving hope for managing this chronic hepatitis D infection. About hepatitis V vaccination schedules, it is given in multiple schedule depending on age and risk. Common regimens include doses at birth, 6 weeks, 14 weeks, or at birth, 1 month, 6 months, like that. So vaccination is the most effective method to prevent hepatitis B vaccine and consequently hepatitis D vaccine. So there is must be public health implication. The carcinogenic classification of hepatitis D calls for intensified global health action. So it stresses the importance of it emphasizes the importance of vaccination. There should be safe medical practices and public education must be given. Enhanced funding must be required. More research are needed to reduce the burden of hepatitis D related liver cancer, and important treatment options are also required. Next news is about Risotop project. Risotop project, the University of Witwatersrand in South America has launched a innovative anti-poaching campaign. It uses radioactive isotopes injected into horns of a rhino. So this method aims to make horns traceable. The horns should be traceable and deter illegal trafficking. So the no one will do the illegal trafficking because of the presence of radioactive isotopes on its horns, rhino's horns. So this initiative follows 6 years of research and testing. It is supported by International Atomic Energy Agency. So the University of Witwatersrand in South America has launched an innovative anti-poaching campaign. The background about the Risotop project, which began with injecting radioisotope isotopes into five rhinos at the Waterberg Biosphere Reserve, following a successful pilot involving 20 rhinos. The university planned mass treatment of rhinos across South America. So this tagging is claimed, radioactive tagging is claimed it is harmless to the animals, and animals should be detectable by global custom radiation monitors because of this radioactive tagging. How radioactive isotope tagging works? Radioactive isotopes are unstable elements that emit radiation to become stable. Low doses are injected to rhino horns through a non-invasive procedures. The radiation makes the horn detectable by radiation portal monitors at borders and ports worldwide. So this is the method to know about the detect the rhinos. It helps custom identify trafficked horn easily also. To test this test use 3D printed horns which mimic real keratin to confirm detection inside large shipping containers. There are some safety and impact on rhinos. Biological dosimetry and cytological exam confirmed the safety of the procedures. Health monitoring by Ghent University showed no cellular damage in treated rhinos. So the radioactive tagging also renders the horn toxic and useless to humans, reducing its value in illegal trades. It will definitely reduce its value in illegal trade. About the poaching crisis and conservation context, rhino population have plummeted from 5 lakh in the early 20th century to around very less. It becomes less only 27,000. So 5 lakh in early 20th century, and now the population is only 27,000. So it's declining. So demands for horns in Asian markets drives because of the reason it is a poaching of rhinos. South America has lost over 10,000 rhinos to poachers in the last decade. So a future about the future prospect and broader application. The project represent an international collaboration which is aiming to use radiation in conservation positively, and it also combines science and technology to tackle wildlife trafficking globally, worldwide. Next news about Indri lemur microbiome. The intestinal microbiome of the Indri lemur, which is a critically endangered species going to extinct, native to Madagascar, has been analyzed for the first time. This study reveals unique bacterial species and social transmission patterns. So this study reveals unique bacterial species and social transmission patterns. So it offers new perspective on conservation efforts. So the intestinal microbe of this Indri lemurs, which is image is given, it is a critically endangered species, has been analyzed for the first time. Indri lemur has also called Baba Koto locally. Baba Koto locally. It is an arboreal lemur. Arboreal means it lives on trees. Arboreal lemurs found only in northeast Madagascar's tropical forest. Madagascar's tropical forest. So it feeds on leaves, fruits. It eats leaves, fruits, seeds, flowers, bark, and occasionally soil because it is an arboreal. The species live in small, stable family groups of 2 to 5 members. Interaction between groups is very minimum due to defined territorial boundaries. Indri cannot survive in captivity. It is critically endangered, going to be extinct, primarily due to habitat loss and due to climate change and human activities as well. Researchers analyzed fecal and soil sample from 6 Indri families. Researcher analyzes feces and soil sample taken from 6 Indri families using genome assembly techniques. With the help of genome assembly techniques, they identified bacterial species in the Indri's intestinal microbiome. There is a presence of one bacterial species in Indri's microbiome. These findings were published in the ISME journals. So the key findings on microbiome compositions, the research uncovered 48 bacterial species in the Indri's intestine microbiomes. Of these, 47 were previously unknown, unique to Indri's. So only Escherichia coli was known species, mostly found in population near human settlements. We know that Escherichia coli is occur in the intestine of human settlements. So this suggests that Indri hosts exclusive microbial communities. The extinction of Indris would also mean the loss of this unique. If this Indri is lost, so other unique bacteria will also lose. So about social transmission of microbiome, the study found that microbiome bacteria are transmitted within the social groups. Each family group shares unique bacterial strains not found in other groups. So this transmission occurs despite Indris ingesting soil, eating soil, which does not contribute to their gut microbes, which does not contribute to their intestine microbiome. Genetic differences in bacterial strains align with geographic separation between groups. So this indicates isolated population develop distinct microbial profiles. Next news is about Niti Aayog report on India's electric vehicle market. India is rapidly advancing, and India is showing advancement in its electrical vehicle sector with a vision to capture a 30% share of electrical vehicles by the year 2030. The recent report by Niti Aayog titled Unlocking a $200 billion Opportunity, Electric Vehicles in India present an in-depth analysis of challenges and potential solution to accelerate this transition. So these documents offer a strategic blueprint to improve electro vehicle adoption, enhance, improve manufacturing, reduce carbon emission, which align with India's clean mobility goals. Status of current electrical vehicle market growth. India's electrical vehicle sales increased from 50,000 units in 2016 to approximately 2 million in 2024. So this share, electrical vehicle share in total vehicle sale increased from 0.5% in 2018 to 7.7% in 2024. So despite slower initial growth compared to global trends, India's electrical vehicle penetration growth has improved, reaching over 40% of global penetration by 2024. So over 6.5 million electric vehicles now operate on Indian roads, with 1.2 million new registration in 2024 happened alone. Approximately 1.2 million new registration happened in 2024 alone. About economic and environment impact, electrical vehicle sector could unlock a $200 billion market by 2035. So it unlock around $200 billion market by 2035. So this expansion, this improvement promises over 10 million jobs. It will provide approximately 10 million jobs across manufacturing, servicing, recycling. It also reduces India's oil import bill by rupees 3.7 lakh crore, and also reduce carbon emission by 839 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So electro vehicle adoption definitely supports India's energy security and also improve climate's condition, commitment. About infrastructure and policy landscape, India currently has 25,000 public electrical vehicle charges. It is approximately 25,000. but needs 2.9 million by 2035 to meet this demand. So this number is very large, 2.9 million by 2035 to meet this demand, electrical charges. 29 states have notified electrical vehicle policies with 4 more drafting plans. However, policy fragmentation and an uneven infrastructure distribution remain challenges, especially in rural and tier 2 cities. It remains challenging in rural and tier 2 cities. Key barriers to what are the barriers to electrical vehicle adoption? Because of its expensive batteries, financing is scarce, particularly for informal sector buyers and MSMEs. So this charging is where charging batteries are very expensive. Now, next news is about Ladakh's Botanical Garden Project. Ladakh's Botanical Garden Projects. In eastern Ladakh, the Sayok village is transforming 10 hectares of barren community land into Union Territory's first botanical garden. In eastern Ladakh, the Sayok village is transforming 10 hectares of barren land into Union Territory's first botanical garden. So it is a big achievement that barren land is converted into botanical garden. First Union Territory's first botanical garden in eastern Ladakh. So it is located on the route of Galwal Valley, and this initiative aims to preserve Ladakh's unique biodiversity with the help of botanical garden. So this project is supported by Leh Hill Council, and it is part of Go Green Go Organic campaign. It is a part of the campaign name is Go Green Go Organic campaigns, and completion is expected by the year 2029. Sayok village, which lies on the way to the Galwan Valley, an area gaining attention for future war zone tourism. So, Siog village, the barren land here is being converted into green zone to conserve local flora and fauna. So, the Leh Hill Council is providing civil work support, including land tilling and water reservoir construction. So, it has allocated around 1 crore rupees for the project. What are the key objectives? It aims to restore the ecological balance by conserving traditional fruit trees like apricots and apples to preserve fruit trees. It will also protect medicinal plants and rare high altitude flora. High altitude flora. This project seeks to promote ecotourism also, and it provides a sustainable livelihood to local communities. So there is an improvement in tourism and economic potential also. It complements the planned battlefield tourism initiative in the region. This project is expected to generate local employment, give local employment in agriculture, horticulture, and tourism sectors. So many employment increases. Number of employment will definitely increase. About environment and social benefits, it will enhance biodiversity. It will definitely improve soil fertility. It promotes conservation of rare plants, medicinal species. Socially, it encourages community participation and provides training, and it also provides different job opportunities in agriculture, horticulture, and tourism sector for local youth. Educational research, there is also educational research importance. It will serve as a center for botanical studies. It will attract students, scientists, researchers, who are interested in Ladakh's unique ecology. So this garden supports botanical garden support research on plant species adapted to high altitude condition. Next news is about sea star wasting disease. Sea star wasting disease. The Pacific coast has witnessed a catastrophic decline, a drastic decline in sea star population since 2013. Over 5 million sea star have perished due to a wasting disease that causes rapid deterioration and death. Over 5 billion sea stars have vanished, have died due to wasting disease, that which is the reason of rapid destruction, deterioration, and death of this sea star. Scientists have now identified the cause, have now identified the reason of this rapid deterioration, rapid death of sea star, which is marking a breakthrough in marine ecology and also in conservation efforts. About outbreak and symptom, the epidemic began in 2013, affecting this epidemic began in 2013, which was affecting sea star from Mexico to Alaska. Infected animals develop white lesion on their body. Their arms twisted and detached within few days only. Their bodies turned to mush. So the sunflower sea star suffered the worst. The sunflower sea star suffered the worst in this epidemic, with 90 to 94% population loss in 5 years itself. California alone lost 99% of its sunflower sea stars. So sunflower sea star scientific name is Pycnopodia. Pycnopodia helianthothoides. Pycnopodia helianthothoides suffered the most. Identification of the cause of this epidemic. A recent study identified the bacteria. The name of that bacteria is Vibrio pectinicida. Vibrio pectinicida. Vibrio pectinicida is the cause of this epidemics, the death of this sea star. This bacteria was found in high amounts in coelomic fluid of coelomic fluid of sick sea star. This bacteria present in the patient, coelomic fluid of sick sea star, but absent in healthy ones. So these bacteria only present when the bacteria which is infected, not present in healthy ones. And the bacteria name is Vibrio pectinicidia. Early research had missed this by focusing on dead tissue only. They did not focus on coelomic fluid of infected sea stars. Vibrio pectinicidia is known to infect shellfish also, and it only grows and thrives in marine environments. Recovery efforts and challenges are also there. With the cause identified, conservation can now focus on protecting remaining healthy population. Researchers are investigating natural immunity in some sea stars and potential probiotic treatment. Rising ocean temperature may worsen outbreaks by boosting vibrio growth, linking the crisis to climate change also. About habitat and biology of sunflower sea star, they live up to 435 meters deep on rocky. They live 435 meters deep on rocky, sandy, muddy substrates. Data on this, their population is very limited, but the disease has caused skinsual decline from south to north. About environmental stresses, stressor and research focus, this disease remain the main threat to sunflower sea star. Main loss to sunflower sea star, the role of environmental stressors, especially those linked to human-driven climate change, is not fully until now understood. These factors are a major focus of ongoing research which is going on. Understanding their influence is crucial, critical for future disease management and species recovery. Next news is about new rain snake species. New rain snake species. Recent research from Mizoram University and Help Earth, a Guwahati-based conservation group, has identified a new species of rain snake in Mizoram. Elevated tropical forest in Mizoram, tropical forest. Name of that new rain species is Smithophis leptofasciatus. Smithophis leptofasciatus, or the narrow-banded rain snake. This discovery adds to the biodiversity of this Mizoram tropical forest and expand knowledge of the genus Smithophis. Identification, where this identification, the narrow-banded rain snake was described after detailed morphological and molecular studies of collected after collection of collected specimens and live observation. This identification has happened after the studies of collected specimen and observation. It was previously mistaken for a Smithophis bicolor, but has been confirmed as a genetically and physically different species. The species name Leptofasciatus means narrow-banded, referring to its unique creamy white or yellowish lime bands on a shiny black body. So about this, Smitholeptofasciatus has narrow, incomplete transverse band, unlike its close relatives. This snake is non-venomous. Non-venomous means it is non-poisonous and semi-aquatic in nature. About habitat and behaviors, it is nocturnal, always appear at night and becomes active mainly during the rainy season, which is typical of because of the reason it is called rainy snakes, and present at altitudes between 900 and 1200 meters. Field studies during the monsoon reveal its semi-aquatic lifestyle. Its lifestyle is semi-aquatic. About reproductive data, it laid 6 eggs, and the species breeding habits and life scale remain an area for further study. About their biodiversity significance, Smithophis leptofasciatus is the third species of genus discovered from Mizoram, following Smithophis temporalis, and second one is the Smithophis mizoremenis. So this mark Mizoram as a full of biodiversity hotspot and a center for evolution of genus Smithophis. The discovery urges further survey to assess the species conservation status. About the conservation concern, the narrow range and dependence on forested stream habitats make Smithophis leptofasciatus vulnerable to habitat loss and degradation. They are slowly, gradually in degradation. Habitat loss. So researchers recommend habitat protection is required, continued monitoring to safeguard this new species and maintain the ecological balance of the region. Next news is about eco-friendly virus control tick defoliator paste. Eco-friendly virus control tick defoliator paste. This news is from Kerala. The Kerala Forest Research Institute has developed a groundbreaking biological solution to protect tick plantation from the destructive tick defoliator moth. A name of that tick defoliator moth is Hyblia pleura. Hyblia pura. So this pest has caused severe damage, severe loss to teak forest for many years, for decades. The new technology uses a naturally occurring virus, Hyblia pura nucleopolyhedrosis virus, HPNPV, Hiblia puro nucleopolyhedrosis virus, which specifically targets and kill the pest larva. This virus kills and target the larva. So this innovation promises a sustainable and eco-friendly alternative to chemical pesticide, eco-friendly alternative to chemical pesticides. So the teak defoliators moth larvae feed on teak leaves, striping trees up to 6 times annually. So this repeated defoliation making tree weak and reduce timber growth. So trees expand energy regrowing leaves instead of increasing wood volume. So their economic loss is substantial, estimated at 3 cubic meters of wood per hectare yearly. So in Kerala alone, this translates to losses rupees 562 crore and 12,525 crore across India because of this tick defoliator moth, which is developing a problem to tick plants. And from this tick defoliator moth to protect the tick plants. About the limitation of chemical control methods, earlier efforts to control the different types of pest involved aerial spraying of chemical pesticide. We are always doing the spray of chemical pesticides. So this method raises environmental concern. It is harming environments and public protest also, especially in Kerala and Madhya Pradesh. So chemical use also risk harming non-target species and disturbing disruptive forest ecosystem. So these challenges brought into light the need for safer and targeted pest control strategies required. About HPNPV virus, KFRI scientists identified HPNPV virus that infects only only teak defoliator larva. It only infects teak defoliator larva. The virus multiplies inside the larva, eventually causing lethal infection, eventually causing their death. When infected larvae die, they release massive quantity of the virus, spreading it further. Even sublethal infection weaken the pest and pass the virus to the next generation, ensuring long-term control. So this host specificity make the HPNB safe for other forest organisms. So there is field trials going at Nilamkur Kerala Tick Hub demonstrated the virus effectiveness in reducing pest outbreaks. So the institute has trained forest department staff in monitoring infestation and applying HB and NPV. The next step is formal adoption by forestry authorities to implement the technology widely. So, this biological control method can prevent large scale defoliation when applied early in pest outbreaks. So, this biological control method are able to prevent large scale defoliation when applied early in pest outbreaks. Next news about India's pension fund role in green economy transition. India faces a massive challenge in financing its climate goals. The country aims for net zero emission by 2070. Achieving this required $10 to $12.5 trillion in investment over the next 25 to 45 years. Additionally, climate adaptation demands about 2.5% of the GDP annually by 2030. So mobilizing such vast fund is important for successful green transition. So India's pension fund role in green economy transition. About climate finance needs in India, India's climate targets involve huge capital demands. Net zero goals require trillions of dollars, trillions, it requires trillions of dollars for renewable energy, clean transport, and adaptation projects. Adaptation alone needs $100 billion yearly by 2030. Meeting these needs depend on mobilizing diverse financial sources. About pension fund as untapped capital, India's pension fund manage around $600 billion and grow 10% annually. So most investment are in government securities. However, pension fund rarely invest in climate related sectors. So their long-term nature suits green investment in instrument like infrastructure investment trust, alternative investment funds, and corporate bonds with credit enhancement can attract pension fund capitals. So, what are the advantages of pension fund for climate investment? Uh, Pension funds have patient investor who rarely withdraw fund quickly. So these align well with the long-term horizon of climate projects, and pension fund prefer low-risk investment in resilient companies, making them ideal for sustainable finance. Long-term liabilities and climate risk. Change poses systematic risk to financial stability. So pension funds have long duration liabilities as payout happen decades later. So this require integrating climate risk into investment decision. Indian pension funds must follow suit as they shift from government securities to corporate assets. About regulatory gaps in climate risk globally, regulation on climate risk disclosure for pension funds are evolving globally. In India, regulatory guidance is limited. The Employees Provident Fund Organization and National Pension System manage most pension funds. So National Pension System has a stewardship code which is promoting responsible investment but lacks enforcement power. Beneficiaries remain unaware of climate risk integration by fund managers. About climate risk disclosure, NPS is part of International Organization of Securities Commission which set standard for sustainability risk disclosure. Adopting these standard these strategies can help Indian pension fund assess transition and physical climate risk. Initiating consultation on climate risk similar to the Reserve Bank of India approach can definitely strengthen sustainable finance. Pension funds can play a important role in closing India's green financing gap while safeguarding financing stability. Next news is about ICMR launches Sign Initiative. ICMR launches Sign Initiative. The Indian Council of Medical Research launched the ICMR Sign Initiative recently. This nationwide student outreach program target school students from classes 9 to 8, means secondary to senior secondary. It aims to spark scientific curiosity and promote careers in biomedical research. So this event aligns with the Prime Minister call for one day as a scientist and honors Professor V. Ramalinga Swamy, a pioneer in Indian medical research. So what is ICMR Sign Initiative? It is stand for Science and Health Innovation for the Next Gen Explorers. It is the first of its kind efforts where all ICMR institutes simultaneously host interactive activities. These activities engage thousands of students across India in science, health, and biomedical research, especially to promote careers in biomedical research. So, this initiative demonstrates ICMR's commitment to nurturing future scientific leaders. On this initiative, target senior secondary students from classes 9 to 12th, and to promote to spark their scientific curiosity and promote careers in biomedical research. Students learn how public health research save lives and what scientists do daily. This program marks that science is practical and dynamic, not just the science is theoretical language. So there is some hands-on experiences and expert interaction in this project. Group activities include a survey game and an anthropometry game. Student visit laboratories and an exhibition by the National Institute of Malaria Research Field Unit. They meet scientists and technical staff to understand their roles in public health research. So this direct interaction helps students see the real world impact, real world experiences, real world problem in biomedical research. What are the significance and national impact? So, ICMR sign reflects India's growing leadership in health research and innovation. So, it definitely supports the government vision to develop a scientific temper among scientific thinking among youth. So, this initiative also commemorates Professor V. Ramalinga Swamy contribution to medical science. By inspiring young minds, ICMR strengthens the future of biomedical research in India. So, it is the only goal. Now, next news is about nickel, copper, platinum group elements. Nickel, copper, platinum group elements. The discovery of deposit of nickel, copper, and platinum group elements in Chhattisgarh, Mahasamund district, marks a key development in India's resource sector. Awarded to Deccan Gold Mines Limited under a 30 square kilometer composite license. This find support the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative by enhancing India's self-reliance in critical minerals. So, discovery or deposit of nickel, copper, platinum group elements discovered in Chhattisgarh, Mahasamund district. So it marks a key development, important development in India's resource sector. So recent discovery, the Bhalukona Jamnidhi block in Basna Tehsil has yielded promising deposit of nickel copper group elements. So what is the area is the Bhalukona Jamanidhi block in Basna Tehsil, which is in Chhattisgarh, Mahasamund district. Initial exploration revealed a 700-meter long mineralized zone. There is a 700-meter long mineralized zone with mafic, ultramafic rocks. Sulfide mineralization extend up to 300 meters deep, indicating substantial reserves. What are the strategic importance? Nickel and platinum group elements are important for green and high-tech industries. So nickel and platinum plays very important role for green and high-tech industries. They are very important in essential in batteries, electronics, and catalytic converters. So this discovery strengthens India's position in securing resources critical for future innovation and sustainable development. So it aligns with the national goal of reducing dependence on foreign imports. Reducing dependence on foreign imports. It is a predictable. Now, government initiatives and auction. Chhattisgarh has auctioned 51 mineral blocks, including key blocks with graphite, lithium, chromium, vanadium. 16 blocks await auction approval from the Union Ministry of Mines. The Directorate of Geology and Mining has set up critical mineral cell to promote this research and collaboration with academia and industry. So, what are the role of Deccan Gold Mines Limited? It DGML specialize in gold and critical mineral exploration. The company's ongoing work in the block is based on prior Geological Survey of India studies state level validation. DGMLS exploration is critical to confirming resource estimates and planning future mining activities also. So it is confirming resource estimates and it is also planning future mining activities. There are few implications. The mineral discovery reflects India's dual focus, to focus on resource security and digital equity. So it contributes to long-term economic growth and technological advancement. It also reinforces India's strategic independence in critical sectors with the help of this discovery. Now, next one is the biocar's role in India's emerging carbon market. So, India is preparing to launch its carbon market in 2026. Carbon market in 2022. The name is Biocar. Biocar, a carbon-rich charcoal made from agricultural and organic waste, means bio waste. Bio means it is made, this carbon-rich charcoal made from agricultural waste, organic waste, decomposable waste, and it is poised to be a key technology for carbon removal. So it will help in removing the carbon emission. So it offers a sustainable way to manage waste and reduce greenhouse gases, which is increasing global warming. So its successes depend on the involvement of multiple sectors and state stakeholders. Biocar production potential in India produces over 600 million tons of agricultural residue and 60 million tons of municipal solid waste annually. So much of this is either burnt openly or dumped, causing pollution and emission of methane, nitrous oxide, and CO2. So these are the gases harming our atmosphere, causing pollution. So using just 30-50% of this surplus waste, India could create 15 to 26 million tons of biocar each year. So this could remove about 0.1 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent annually, contribution to climate goals. Byproducts and energy generation. Biocar produces also yields syngas and bio oil. Syngas could generate 8 to 13 terawatt hours of electricity annually, about 0.5 to 0.7% of India's total electricity. This could replace 0.1 to 0.7 tons of coal. Boil oil could offset 12 to 19 million tons of diesel or kerosene use, reducing fossil fuel imports and cutting over 2% of India fossil fuel emission. So biocar is a carbon sink. Biocar stores carbon in soil for 100 to 1000 years due to its stable nature. It improves soil health by enhancing water retention and organic carbon content. It also reduces nitrous oxide emission by 30 to 50%, a potent greenhouse gas with 273 times the warming impact of CO2. Modified biocar can also capture CO2 from industrial gases, though this is less efficient than other methods. In agriculture application across sectors, in agriculture, biocar improves soil fertility, water retention, boosting crop yields by 10 to 50% and lowering fertilizer needs by 10 to 20%. So these are the advantages of biocar. In construction, adding biocar to concrete increases strength and heat resistance while capturing CO2. In wastewater treatment, it is also used to treat large volumes of water cost effectively, addressing the issue of untreated wastewater in India. So there are some challenges to biocar adoption. Despite its promising and positive effect, biocar faces hurdles. There is no standardized market for feedstock or consistent carbon accounting methods. This lowers investor confidence. Other barriers include limited resources, evolving technologies, weak policy support, lack of coordinated frameworks across agriculture, energy, and climate sectors. So, awareness among stakeholders remains low. There is policy and market integration. This includes creating region specific standards and optimizing biomass use based on local condition. Biocar should be integrated into crop residue management, bioenergy initiative, and state climate action plans. Recognizing biocar in the carbon market will attract investment and generate income for farmers through carbon credits. There are some economic and environmental benefits. Deploying Deploying biocar production at the village level could create around 5,20,000 rural jobs. It will give many jobs, approximately 5,20,000 rural jobs. This links climate action with rural economic growth. Additional benefits like improved soil health, reduced fertilizer use, high crop yields should be factored into policies and markets to maximize biocar's potential. Next news is about crop protection chemical market. Crop protection chemical markets. The crop protection chemical sector in India is witnessing changes in 2025. The growing scarcity of farm labor is driving demand for herbicides. The growing scarcity of farm labor, this number of farm labor is driving demand for herbicides. This chemical help control weeds that compete with crops for nutrients and waters. The market is dominated by multinational companies, but Indian firms are making strategic moves to expand their presence. So, about crop protection chemicals, commonly called pesticide, which protect crops from different types of pest, diseases, and weeds. These they include insecticide for insect pest, fungicide for fungal disease, and herbicide for weed controls. So, weed reduces crop yields. You know about the unwanted plant that is called weeds, which reduces crop yields by competing for resources and harboring pest. Affecting weed control improves fertilizers and irrigation efficiency. So, crop protection chemicals markets. So, market size and segment growths. India's organized crop protection market is valued at about rupees 24,500 crore. Insecticide from the largest segment at rupees 10,700 crore, followed by herbicide at rupees 8,200 crore and fungicide at rupees 5,600 crore. So, herbicide are the fastest growing segment, expanding over 10% annually, driven by labor shortage and increased weed control needs. There is dominance of multinational corporation. The market is largely controlled by global firms such as Bayer AG, Syngenta, Adama, Corteva Agriscience, Sumitomo Chemical. Syngenta and Adama are owned by China's Sinochem Holding Corporation. India's companies like Dhanuka Agritech and Crystal Crop Protection Limited hold very smaller shares but are growing through acquisition and innovation. So, about herbicide market dynamics, herbicide are increasingly replacing manual weedings due to rising labor cost and scarcity. Manual removal of unwanted plant is time consuming and physical demanding also. It requires many labors. So, power weeders reduce time but are less effective for deep rooted or dense weeds. Herbicide offer a cost-effective and labor-saving alternatives with sales rising sharply, especially in the pre-emergent and early post-emergent categories. So the innovation in Indian industry first, it also develops Sicosa, a patented herbicide for paddy that control various weeds at a lower cost than manual weedings. CCPL acquired ethoxysulfuron and gramoxone brands for South Asia markets. There is some changing farm practices also. Herbicide use is shifting from reacting post-emergency spraying to preventing pre-emergence and early post-emergence application. So this proactive approach improves weed control efficiency and crop health, especially amid labor shortage when there is a labor shortage and rising wages. Labor shortage impact, there is a labor shortage impact. The shortage of agriculture laborers willing to perform manual weeding is a key driver for herbicide demand. So rising daily wages and unavailability of laborers during critical periods make chemical weed control a practical necessity. So herbicide now serve as essential labor serving tools akin to tractors and mechanized equipments. So that's all about 41 Science and Technology Current Affairs from 1st August to 8th August 2025. Kindly watch the next series. Stay consistent. Thanks for watching. Best of luck for your forthcoming exam. Like, share, and subscribe.